Welcome to the Motherhood Mentor Podcast. I'm Becca, a holistic life coach, mom of two, wife, and business owner. This is a podcast where we will have conversations and coaching around all things strategy and healing that supports both who you are and what you do. So grab your iced coffee or whatever weird health beverage you are currently into, and let's do the damn thing. Welcome to today's episode of the Motherhood Mentor Podcast. Today, we are going to be talking about somatics, somatic healing, what it is, and specifically what it's meant to me and my journey of somatic healing, even before I had the language for it. But also since I've been in my training and certification process, what somatic healing has looked like and felt like, and really just even kind of demystifying it. So somatic healing, I think it's really important for me specifically to name that this is just a framework and a language that we are giving to something that your body already knew how to do, but that we've forgotten the wisdom of. I think our culture, specifically the Western culture, has really been disembodied for a long time and really prioritized the body's behavior and then the mind, and really disassociated from our body as a being. And somatics really is the living organism in its wholeness. So I love the way that the Embody Lab described it, which is the holistic and organic process in which a client is able to discover a path of somatic, energetic, emotional, and spiritual fulfillment. So focusing on the intelligence of your body, of where is there life moving in your body? Where is there energy and sensation and emotion? What is going on in your nervous system, right? Your nerves and the way that your brain and your body interact together along with your spirit, right? Where is there action and non-action? How are you relating to your inner world, but also your outer world? Somatics is understanding your conscious and your non-conscious patterns, not only through a mental, cognitive, story-based view, but also what is the actual experience and sensation and the bodily expression of what you're going through. My journey through somatics, essentially, I would say that I had been feeling and witnessing somatic healing long before I had any idea or language for what I was experiencing. So when I was early on in motherhood, I would say around the toddler phase, I started feeling parts of myself come online that I had never felt before. Before motherhood, I was fairly disassociated from my body, pretty disconnected from my emotional experience. And I was a very emotional person, but I didn't have language for emotion or sensation. And early in motherhood, I started going through some pretty intense, I would say, like trauma being brought up. Like my body started to remember things, it started to feel things, and it started to express things. And it was really, really frustrating for me. And frustrating, actually, that doesn't begin to encapsulate what I was feeling. I was distraught and I was pissed and I was grieving because here I was finally in this place where I had everything I had ever wanted. And, back then it was like, I've done the work though. I've done therapy. I should be over this. I know what's wrong with me. I know about this abuse trauma. I know what happened to me, and, I've forgiven the abuser and blah, blah, blah. Like I should be fine. I should be okay. But I was not okay. And I started to really have some pretty intense symptoms in my body, and my body had been awakened by birth, by motherhood. What I used to be able to disassociate from, what I used to have the capacity to, ignore and repress. I no longer had the capacity to repress those things. Motherhood made me so sensitive. And I think I've always been a sensitive person, but motherhood made me even more sensitive. And I started to sense and know and feel things in my body that were really hard, that I didn't have language for. I didn't have tools for. I didn't have community who was talking about this. And I remember feeling so alone. I was going to these MOPS groups, and I remember in like these Bible studies, and week after week, people were talking about things, but no one was talking about anything. They were like talking around things, but not talking into it. And here I was having this profound, deep experience of the rug being pulled out of underneath me of who I was and what I believed and what I felt. And I didn't know what to do with all of that. But it's just so fascinating that, and there's so many different aspects to this that it's hard to tell the story without getting into all the different intricacies, because I really think that nuance is so powerful. But one of the powerful things that I remember started happening, my second birth experience, the birth of my son, I felt in my body a resource and a strength and a fight and a staying power. It was the first time that I felt in my body, I have capacity for massive amounts of discomfort. My son was born at home, and I was surrounded by people who saw me as capable and sturdy and strong. And I remember that day was one of the first times that all of my sensitivity did not feel like a weakness. It felt like, oh my gosh, look at all that I can hold. Look at all of the power that my body and my emotion and my brain and my spirit can cultivate, can hold. It was the first time that I felt like my body was a gift of God. It was the first time that my body felt like my own. And it really, now I have the language of, there was this somatic experience of non-trauma, of intense activation without it being something horrid happening to my body. And it fundamentally changed me. It changed me as a person. It changed the entire concept of who I believed myself to be. And that birth was so, so profound. And it was so fascinating, because it was in that time where after I was recovered from birth and all of that, I had started working out and exercising, and I started doing these kickboxing workouts. And these were pretty intense workouts, but almost every single time I would get to the end and I would just start sobbing. And it was like it was like my body was letting go of things that I didn't even know my body needed to let go of. And now I have this language of my body honestly, even before the birth and before finding this kickboxing, my body, my animal body had never experienced feeling fight. My body didn't know it was allowed to fight. My body only thought I was allowed to fawn and freeze and disassociate and be numb. And so I started gaining access to these parts of me that had been repressed, because, when you're a child who's experiencing abuse, you can't fight. You can't run away. You can't escape it. And so your body does this beautiful, wise thing, and it shuts down and it fawns. It fawns so that you try to create as much safety as possible. And what started happening in that season is I started to feel entire parts of my being come back online that at one time needed to be repressed, and realizing that the things that used to keep me safe were keeping me stuck, because I was showing up to my marriage. I was showing up to my motherhood in this deep, deep fawning where I was completely disconnected from self. And in that season, as I was disconnected from self, I started to witness that I could not feel myself. And if I could not feel myself and attend to myself and lead myself, all of my dysfunction, it was bleeding into the things and the people that I loved most. And in the season, I started to gain permission for this activation. There was one really powerful time where I had this experience where I had started being awake to this fight energy, to this this deep anger and rage about the abuse and what it stole from me. And early motherhood was so powerful because I started to witness the beauty of innocence and the beauty of having a body that was untouched by trauma. And there was this deep grief and anger that rose up in me of like, I never knew that. I still don't know that in my body. Like, I don't know that freedom. I don't know that innocence or that purity or that joy that I see. And all of a sudden I started to realize like that abuse and that trauma does not get to steal this experience from me. I was at a church function and I don't remember what was happening at the time with the abuser, but there was something going on. And I shared a prayer request about the healing work that I was doing in recovery. I'll never forget someone so well-intentioned just said, you really just need to forgive the abuser. And she said it in prayer and she just kept praying for forgiveness. And the voice of God rose up so strong in me of like, no, the fuck you don't. Like, you're not ready to forgive because you have not held space for everything that stole from you. I deeply believe that forgiveness is a powerful, powerful thing, but forgiveness cannot be the way that we bypass pain. In that season, I started to actually finally feel free and healed and whole because I refused to look at what I had gone through and try to tie a pretty bow on it of if you just forgive, it'll all be okay. And it was finally this witnessing of this was not okay and I am still okay. It was holding in both hands these immensely hard things and this reality that I was building an entirely new and beautiful body in relation to my sexuality and relationship with other people and safety and motherhood. And I was witnessing my beautiful children growing up not having that. That was somatic healing before I had the name and the language for it, is that my body was not just keeping the score. My body was healing the score. My body deeply wanted me to heal. My spirit, my soul wanted me to have freedom. It wanted to have new patterns of relating to myself and relating to the world because I was no longer in the past. I was no longer in that story. I was no longer in that place where I was a victim. And I had to start learning how to feel in my body something other than victim. I had to, one, fully embody it, honestly. Like there was this part of me that had capacity for the first time in my life to hold space for the part of me that was victimized. I had this, I was a very good mother. I was very protective. I was very passionate. I was very loving and caring, and I would have given anything for my babies. And I used that mother part of me to start mothering the parts of me that needed to be seen and witnessed and held space and needed boundaries, that needed someone to respond appropriately. In the season, I'm so grateful that my husband had this beautiful strength of acting accordingly to who I was and to my current reality and being, and not to my old painful patterns. And I am so grateful that he did not respond to me and to my emotional reactivity and to my body responding with fawning, my patterns of fawning and codependency, he had this beautiful strength of holding health even when I wasn't in health. And I deeply did not like that at a somatic level because it was uncomfortable for me to be present with him and be present with my current self. And I had to start learning how to create and communicate as a adult, mature self. And that was deeply uncomfortable. This was all before I had any language for it. I can't remember how long ago it was. It was quite a while ago. I read The Body Keeps the Score. And, I don't actually recommend that book to everyone. It's a very intense book. And I really think it's geared mostly towards people who want to have understanding of really somatic healing. But there's some other books, and I'll drop them in the show notes. But it really gave me so much perspective on what had happened and what it had created, because it wasn't just what had happened, it was what it had created. And as I started to dive into and learn more about somatic healing and experiencing and embodiment and learning the language of sensation and emotion, and learning how our bodies hold things, and learning how our bodies release things, especially how to create new patterns of feeling, how to access resource, how to access peace and pleasure, and to build capacity for activation. And the more I started to learn about this and integrate it and implement it, I started realizing that some of the most simple things were the things that were healing me. Going on walks with music, learning Enneagram and tapping into my different centers of intelligence, learning how to feel my intuition, learning how to be in my body, learning to feel pleasure and receive in my body. Like, my relationship to food changed. And all of this led me into my own work. And then after a while, I started realizing that's, I had been coaching. Obviously, my timeline here, I'm not giving you a really good timeline. So don't take this as like, oh, she's giving me the timeline of what happened, because there's a lot of time in between when I did my own healing and then when I had started doing coaching. And when I first started coaching, there was a lot of mind-based and there was still a lot of body, but I didn't have language of how to coach other women through what I had experienced. And so that's where I went and started working with mentors who were somatic experiencing mentors who were somatic therapists. I did courses for myself first of learning the language from my own experience, doing these practices on my own. I deeply, deeply believe that as a coach, as a mentor, it is massively important that I am not just accruing a knowledge-based way of showing someone, but that I am doing the work for myself to embody it. Because I deeply believe, and this is one of the boundaries that I really hope I can always stand on and hold for myself, that I refuse to be in a position where I'm helping other women heal at the detriment of my own self or my family or my marriage or my body. And so I always do the work myself first. So I started being in somatic healing for myself. And then after a while, I started, listening to podcasts and reading books. And then I went to the Embody Lab and did their mind body somatic certificate. And after that, I did the integrative somatic parts work, which, oh my gosh, is just one of my favorite pieces of somatic work. But all of this to say, somatics is not some sort of crazy new trend. It's actually, I think, a reemergence of knowledge that we always had, that we always needed, that we always wanted all along, but that we are finally witnessing is absolutely needed. And I think a lot of that is that for years, we've gotten away with high functioning, with repression, with, over functioning our way out of health. And the last couple of years, we realized we just delayed more of the problems. We didn't actually heal them. We put these band-aids on quote unquote mental health. Even the fact that it's called mental health, when you are a whole human, like you are a whole human being. And yeah, there is the mental side of things. There is your thought life. There is hormones in your body, and there are electro signals that are going on, but there's also muscle tissue and fascia and your gut and your spirit. You are a whole person. There's the environment that you're in. Oftentimes the sicknesses we'll experience in our bodies is our body is being a canary in a coal mine of this environment is making me sick and it's not good for me. And what I love about somatics is that it brings into awareness and to importance and validation the whole human experience, all of who you are. And it brings into not just what happened in the past, which I think a lot of our culture is hyperfixating on right now, is like, what broke me? We're focusing on the trauma and the diagnoses, and we're trying to come up with all these intellectual names and reasons. And, oh, this is my pattern. And all of that is great. It's somewhat helpful. But what I really focus on for myself, and even working with women, is what is present in your body. And maybe that is something that happened from the past, but instead of excavating into the past, of being able to point to exactly how and why you're broken, what if we find in the present moment what needs healing, what needs resource, what needs a deep spiritual medicine? What if, instead of poking at the wound, what if we cover it with a balm? What if we find a way to ease or soothe or resource or support or unrepress parts of you? If you are stuck in fight mode, can we figure out where that fight is in you, and can we validate it? And then can we also find the parts of you that are able to move out of fight and into regulation, or into a stillness, or leaving, or understanding that our behaviors of what we do in relationships, how we parent, how we take care of ourselves, the way we eat, the way we drink, the way we do everything, our behavior and even just our mindset is also deeply connected to our nervous system and our body. And learning how to lead and take care of that system, our whole systems well, that's what I think we're relearning how to do with somatic healing. We are bringing permission for what you're experiencing now, but we're also bridging the gap of transformation of the patterns you want to create, the way you want to feel, the way you want to feel present and connected, how to feel good, but also how to feel bad without having to spiral into being miserable. Developing capacity for this whole human messy experience and being able to show up to it with health, with the way that we respond to it. This might not have been your fault, but it is now your responsibility. Being able to feel your capacity and your resource, and being able to feel the room that you're in, because so much of trauma and mental health is that our bodies are living in the remembered past, or our bodies are living in expected threat of the future. And we've forgotten how to be present in the room that we're in, which isn't always a regulating thing. There might be something in the room with you that's activating, that's overwhelming, that's with you. But when you're present, when you're in the present, you usually have capacity for that thing. Your body knows how to respond. Your nervous system will have an appropriate response. We're going to do another episode on nervous system regulation, but being healed or regulated doesn't mean that you no longer have a human experience, that you no longer have an animal body that wants what it wants. It doesn't mean that we escape hard feelings and emotions and experiences. But what I've experienced is that it does create a capacity to be with it, to tolerate it, and not just tolerate it, but even it builds our capacity to tolerate pleasure, rest, joy, fun, play, contentment. Those are all things that we can also resource in our body and practice and develop a language and a resource for. And that is just as much as healing as doing the deep work. We don't just have to go in and aggressively pull weeds out. There's going to be weeds. They're going to pop up. There's going to be hard stuff. But what if we tended to the soil of our life? What if we tended to our animal bodies like a garden? We need sun. We need nutrients. Our biological bodies have a massive impact on our mental, emotional health. Our spiritual well-being has a massive impact on our mental and emotional health. Our environment is massively impacting our biological, physiological selves. There's all of these different parts of you. What if we treated you as a whole person? What if you got to go through life feeling whole? Like no part of yourself is offline or repressed. You get to feel like a whole person. And so your whole self has so much more capacity to parent, to deal with conflict, to make decisions, to do your work in this world. I hope today demystified somatic healing. I would love to know if you have any questions or your own journey or resources that you have loved, books that you've loved for somatic healing. I really want to be able to share this with others. There'll be some links to a couple books in the show notes, as well as a couple things that I love for somatic healing. If you want to experience like a somatic session with me, if you want to come to one of my free somatic groups, we're going to have a couple podcasts where I lead you through some of these somatic experiences, these ways to tap into your body. And I'm really looking forward to bringing those to you. So I would love to hear from you if today's episode resonated with you, if it taught you anything, if it gave you permission, please reach out. Thank you so much for being here today, and I'll talk to you next time. Thanks for hanging out today on the Motherhood Mentor Podcast. If you loved today's episode, share it with a friend or tag me in your stories on Instagram so that we can connect. Take up audacious space in your life, and I'll see you next time.